Welcome to Hive Mind Community Podcast, brought to you by TechSoup. Our podcast is a part of the digital activism program, through which we provide the civil society with knowledge, tools, grants, and networking opportunities so they can thrive. Welcome to Hive Mind Podcast. I'm happy to introduce our guest, Aleksandra Przegalińska, Associate Professor and Vice President of Koźmińskiej University, responsible for International Relations and ESR, and Senior Research Associate at Harvard University. Aleksandra received her PhD in the field of philosophy of artificial intelligence at University of Warsaw. She is the head of the Human-Machine Interaction Research Center at Koźmińskiej University and the leader of the AI in Management program. Aleksandra conducted postdoctoral research at the Center for Collective Intelligence at MIT in Boston. She is interested in the future of work, seen through the lens of emerging technologies, as well as in natural language processing, among others. She graduated from the New School for Social Research in New York. Aleksandra is also co-author of Collaborative Society and Strategizing AI in Business and Education, published with Dariusz Jamielniak. Welcome, Aleksandra. It is a great pleasure, and I'm very happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm also very happy to have this conversation. I think a very much needed one.
So starting from the beginning, what actually is AI? There is a lot of conversation and discussion on AI, but what actually is it? Is there only one AI or many AIs? And what are the types and ideas behind it?
We could conduct a conversation about what AI is for, I guess, at least 3 or 4 hours, because obviously it's a matter of debate. It's a matter of dispute what counts as AI, what does not count as AI. But certainly, I think we could say artificial intelligence is a discipline of science today, where we build algorithms that have a specific feature because they learn. So they can behave better over time, or they can solve certain tasks much better over time if you teach them to do so. And we have plenty of these algorithms. And again, some people would say that those that we consider more old algorithms or maybe old school algorithms do not count as AI anymore because they are way too simple. And those complex algorithms would count as AI. But for me, it's actually a very broad discipline where you have algorithms that are strictly derived from statistics. You can think about regression that is helping us out in weather forecasting on a daily basis. And we can have algorithms such as classification that, for instance, help in finding somehow troubling, potentially fraudulent transactions in banks. And these have been used for many years now, and they are quite simple. And you can think of unsupervised algorithms. So those algorithms that are, for instance, fueling today Netflix or Spotify in recommending content for you as a user in a personalized way. And on top of that, we also have algorithms that we call reinforcement learning. And these are the newest types of AI algorithms. And technically speaking, they are, I would say, the most opaque ones, the ones that are most black box. We don't exactly know how they work, but they really work very well. And these are the algorithms that are fed by sort of experience. So the algorithm enters the world, has to behave in one way or another, gathers information about how it has performed in the world. Think about a robot, for instance. And then if the performance is good, the algorithm can figure out, okay, in this particular situation, I should behave in such and such way. And in a different situation, I have to find a different strategy. So if a robot enters a slippery surface, it has to find a way to move in the best possible way on that surface. And for that, the optimal way to perform would be to use those most complex algorithms because it's a heavy task, right? So we have sort of at least 3 different disciplines in artificial intelligence that allow us to build these types of algorithms. But in overall, we call all of them machine learning. So technically, quite often, we wouldn't use the term artificial intelligence, but rather machine learning to describe those algorithms that we are, in fact, building.
Thank you for this broad introduction. So this is also interesting that we are talking about AI, but maybe we should talk and think more about machine learning as well. But you shared some topics that are connected with, let's say, business and economic capital.
Yeah.
And I was wondering about the different kind of capitals, the social ones. And in this case, how could AI help civil society organizations in case and in terms of social capital, community building, and trust building? So put the focus not on getting more clients, more money, but the different kind of scope of work.
So listen, I think that the first thing to say is that obviously artificial intelligence is a scientific discipline, right? So we mentioned a couple of different groups of algorithms that are built within it or incubated within it, and this group is constantly growing. This is another thing to be said. We have more and more of such algorithms. They are more nuanced, they can serve different purpose, different goal. And it's also a discipline that you can think about in terms of certain sub-disciplines. So currently, I guess everybody's sort of hyping about one sub-discipline of artificial intelligence, which is natural language processing, because we have things like ChatGPT, and this is a language generator, a text generator that is extremely popular, but it counts as a part of a bigger discipline where you also have, for instance, machine translation, right? So everything that involves using an algorithm to process text would be fitting this particular sub-discipline that is called natural language processing. But you also have machine vision, which is another very big part of AI, where you have algorithms that are either classifying, objects around them, what they see, or human faces, which can serve surveillance purposes, but doesn't have to, could also serve quite good purposes, for instance, in the case of some healthcare applications, those that are connected with diagnosing something, for instance. And you have other disciplines like robotics, and a couple of different ones that are also developing, maybe not as rapidly. And as a scientific discipline, AI, this is, I think, what I really wanted to say, is very robust in the sense that you can use it for all those different purposes that you can think of, right? So these algorithms can help you in serving civil society or giving more transparency to democratic processes, but they can just as well be used for better customer segmentation, like you said yourself. And it is also true that I think for the past 10 years, what we have mostly seen was an interest of business, right? So business had enough assets, enough resources, enough money to really dwell into the world of algorithmics and use it for the purpose of figuring out what the customer could want, what else to sell to that customer, how to track what my competitors are doing and how to kind of be ahead of them, right? Build a competitive edge or competitive advantage. But I think the very robustness of these algorithms allows us to think about other purposes, right, for these types of algorithms. And I think it was around the COVID time where people also within the AI community started being more vocal about the fact that it's such a powerful and disruptive technology that actually it should serve a beneficial goal. And that goal could be, well, figuring out what to do about the climate crisis, finding usage of artificial intelligence that can allow us to optimize resources in a better way, optimize water usage, energy usage, and whatnot. So we've seen that branch of artificial intelligence developing, taking up. For instance, the United Nations started finding those best applications of AI in this area. You can think also about artificial intelligence in the context of healthcare and public health in general. And here we've seen very interesting algorithms being used for diagnosing diseases, but also onboarding patients in hospitals. And obviously, some of that is related to big institutions, but some of that, I think, serves a public goal. And beyond that, I would say that we can think of artificial intelligence as an asset for organizations, for NGOs as well, particularly those newest branches of artificial intelligence, something I'm assuming we will talk about, which is generative AI. That can be super helpful for any type of organization. we can think of all the applications that are related to automation of different processes, generation of text, production of content that can be enabled with the use of generative AI. And it can, I would say, any organization, including an NGO, more efficient in that sense that it serves its goal much better.
All right. So we should just track these things that are going on in different parts and maybe rethink about it. But when you were talking about it, I thought about access. Because, of course, the business community, let's call it that way, look at AI as an opportunity to grow, to optimize. But in case of a civil society organization, there is still a discussion about access. And what do you think could improve access and like thinking about AI as part of CSO or generally a civil organization?
Well, I think one thing to be said is that we are currently experiencing a certain revolution. It's a big revolution for the world, but also for the AI community itself. And that has a lot to do with generative AI that I just mentioned. And why? The reason is that this type of technology, like, again, I know it's an emblem, but let's use this very frequent example, which is ChatGPT. You can obviously talk to it. You don't have to program it. So on some level, access for everybody really improved with this new type of artificial intelligence that you rather talk to and you don't necessarily have to code. So you don't have to really dwell into certain technical competences, capacities to use this type of technology, but instead it's very intuitive to use. And in that sense, I think certain access has been increased and AI is really going mainstream. There are no barriers on the side of, let's say, technology itself, on the side of the interface. Anybody who speaks any language today actually could probably use artificial intelligence. However, we will see differentiations. English is obviously the dominating language of talking to artificial intelligence, and your output that you would get from an AI model if you speak English is going to be much better than in other languages. That is certainly true, and I hope that will change. But nonetheless, certain barrier, I think the strongest one that prevented mainstream audiences and different types of institutions from using artificial intelligence has been removed because we can essentially access the technology, and with a very short onboarding, you can have people from any organization, an NGO, just start talking to this model or prompt it, as we call it, and get something out from it. It is obviously a certain craft or a skill that you could improve, and I'm assuming that in the future, many organizations, including NGOs, will build their own list of prompts. So their own sort of language of talking to artificial intelligence that is really focused on their own problems or things that they would like to solve. So in a way, this is probably not something that is tangible today, but if we look into the future, 2-3 years from now, my assumption is that most organizations will have a book or list of prompts that they use to talk to the model, to trigger the model, because this is something that gives the best results. So if you are tackling some sort of problems as an NGO for a local community, you know what these problems are, how they should be categorized, and then you will figure out a way to talk to the model so that it understands that this is the problem that you would like to solve. And this is something for the future where if you already have, I don't know, somebody in the organization that has talked extensively, say to ChatGPT, about the problem that the organization is trying to solve, this is something that is a very valuable knowledge that should be collected. And in that sense, I think, as I said before, this is a barrier that has been removed. But there are, as you said yourself, some other barriers, right? It is very true that you need financial assets to use these models, right? This is not a free activity. It could be if those big tech companies decided to work with organizations on some sort of preferential basis, which I think should happen. But in general, what I would say is that this costs a lot of money. This is a big investment, right? If you want to connect to the API of ChatGPT or any other big language model, because there are a couple, this is a costly activity. So in that sense, I think the access is going to be a bit more limited for organizations, as opposed to businesses that can pay for that and can become essentially clients of these generative AI models. So there is a difference here, but I would still stress that thinking back about artificial intelligence a few years ago, even though I was working with generative models since 2019, I was not expecting such a big boom. And I find that interest in, say, ChatGPT mostly, soon perhaps also Bard, maybe open source tools as well, to be very promising also for organizations, because this is a situation that is quite unprecedented. We have never had a situation where the world was really focusing so much on AI beyond the technical realm and the business realm that was focused on money generation.
I was wondering, do you think that AI right now is more of an internet scenario as a phenomena, or maybe the blockchain scenario, the two ways?
Yeah, well, listen, I hope that the future is not buried for blockchain, because blockchain is certainly a very promising technology that should be within the scope of interest of various non-governmental organizations as well. If we're thinking about civil society, we're thinking about democracy, principles of participation, this is a technology that certainly makes participation very transparent, potentially could make any elections not at all prone to frauds. So it's a very useful technology. Actually, it's very easy to implement. In many ways, it's also cheaper than artificial intelligence when you think about its carbon footprint and the way you have to implement it, the way, the sort of the steps that you have to take to implement it. So I do hope that even though the reputation of blockchain has been suffering greatly because of the speculation of cryptocurrencies, this is not a technology that we will fully abandon, but it will come back in a better way, and hopefully maybe with certain increased interest in technologies, NGOs will be the ones to promote it and not necessarily the tech bros or crypto bros, if you will. But coming back to the core of your question, I think artificial intelligence is something we could call general purpose technology. This is a term that has been frequently used to describe things like the steam engine or the internet, like you said yourself. So a technology that is a major disruptor for anything you can think of. And I do have to say that even though machine learning, so the technical sort of description of artificial intelligence, has not been really making the headlines anywhere for the past 10 years. Currently, with generative AI, it is the case. You have students using it. You have the educational sector being completely disrupted. You can think of any sector that you want, be it healthcare, logistics, the legal sector, e-commerce, advertising, the public sector, administration, NGOs, and all of them can find use cases for this technology. And with this decreased barrier, I think that really takes up very strongly. So to me, I should put it this way. Generative AI is the next layer of the internet. Generative AI is probably a gateway to technologies per se. The way we will use the internet in the future, or the metaverse, if you want to go even further, is going to be through generative AI. It will become a layer. You can think about your mailbox. The way you will be, and myself as well, we will be drafting emails in the future is probably going to be by default with generative AI. The way we will use sort of search engine will also be generative. So this will be the way to ask questions to the hive mind, right? To the collective intelligence out there to search for things. This will be a way to categorize knowledge. Even today with ChatGPT, you have a possibility to visualize data. Say you have your own data set, you can use a plugin and then ChatGPT can visualize all that data for you. So you have a toolkit that is increasing, or you can call it also a certain, I would say, set of instruments within the chat that allow you to do different things with the data that you put there. So I think that generative AI is going to be something that will build the internet, right? Build the content that we will see online. I hope that this content will not be too much. I'm sometimes a bit worried because when I prompt chat, the answers that I'm getting are very, very long, and I think they don't have to be that redundant. So I'm a bit worried that the internet of the future is full of redundant text, and I hope that's not the case because that would not be that much welcome. But in all honesty, I do think that this is something that takes the internet to the next level.
And getting back to the CSO focus and scope, as you mentioned, chat as an example that, of course, comes to mind as a number one because of the moment that we are right now. But I was thinking, what should people who are engaged or work in a civil society organization should remember during using those generative AI that are already there? Meaning that from the one point we are talking today and focusing that AI is science, but those tools that you mentioned, but also other existing, are owned by someone. They are not only for scientific purpose. They have like the owner and the business context from the one point. And the second thing that I was thinking that it is connected to some data sets. So if you could give advice for CSOs, what they should remember about during using those generative AI that are already on a plate, not thinking about the speculative future, but kind of thinking about this moment.
Yeah, well, first of all, the thing that I would maybe emphasize is that the world does not end at ChatGPT, and certainly not the world of generative AI. ChatGPT has become, as we said before, this emblem that sort of now overlaps with AI per se. You're thinking AI, you're thinking ChatGPT. That's how it is. This is the momentum that we are at. But if you track back the past 2 or 3 years, there has been a lot going on in generative artificial intelligence. We do have big business players, obviously Google being one of them. Yet another, I'm assuming, will be Amazon, that is currently trying to build its own model called MMCOT. There are some other companies like Meta, but Meta, their model has been leaked, and therefore now they are a strong advocate of open source models, which is a sort of a funny phenomenon when you think about the history of Meta as a company and its ideas around proprietary AI. But it is the case. Their model is open sourced. Their model is also much more modest, right? So when you think about ChatGPT, the version that was fueled by Engine 3, which is a few months ago, that's the model that we've worked on, had 175 billion parameters. The current one that is fueled by GPT-4 or 4.2, we don't even know how many parameters it has. It's so big, and the company does not communicate that even at all, right? And as opposed to that, Meta's model is 65 billion parameters, which means it's less capable of, you can think of it as, in a way, detecting what you want from it. Right? So what is your prompt about? What's your motivation? And how to respond to it in the most adequate way. So the way these models work is they search their own knowledge base to figure out what would be probably the best answer to your question or your task that you've given to that model. So those models that are equipped with more parameters will simply do that much better. And it is also true that the most advanced and complex models that we have today that are on the table, like you said yourself, are commercial models. But it is also true that we have quite a large number of open source models that are interesting. And I would say for the NGOs, this is something to think of as a certain alternative because, like we said, using ChatGPT, generating those tokens, right? So this output with ChatGPT, this is a costly activity, can often be a costly activity. Whereas for the open source models, the rules are different, right? By definition, they are open. They are also more transparent. So you can expect less bias and more understanding of how exactly the model works and how to fix it if it doesn't work properly. So you have models like GPT-J, for instance, which is an open source version of GPT. You have, like we said, Llama by Meta, that is now an open sourced model, very often used by researchers for different types of tasks. You have Alpaca, it's a model from Stanford. And you have a couple of others that are also open sourced. And this is a growing activity. You have a big part of the AI community now focused on building such models. And it's not so hard. It may seem hard, but I have to tell you that even my students, on their second year, they're already capable of building a small language model, right? A GRU, or we call it a transformer. So technically, it's the type of model that, well, is close to GPT or ChatGPT. And obviously, you have to have a lot of data. You need to have big data sets to train these models properly. And if you have less either understanding of how that should work or just less access to data, your model is going to be more modest and more limited. But it does not mean that it cannot be used for all types of activities. Think about a person who's doing all the promotional activities for an NGO, be it an NGO that works with civil society and wants to be very vocal about certain things. Let's say they want to increase their presence during the elections. And they want to send out some message. I think a generative model can be very helpful in that. And you don't have to have actually a model that is going to be super large. You can have a model that is going to be more modest, but you need an expert that will work with the model and supervise what the model has produced as an output. So this has to be a person that will know how to edit whatever the model has figured out as the best way to, put some content on social media or something like that. So I do think that one thing to explore is definitely those models that are cheaper, perhaps that are more transparent. This is, for me, a very important principle, particularly when you think about NGOs, and those models that are built together with the community, because these are the models that you as an NGO can contribute to as well. You can co-develop that model. You have much more agency in that respect, right, than you would if you just relied on commercial models like for instance, Bard or ChatGPT. So I think that is the first thing to remember, that maybe there are tasks that are very crucial and that require a very big model, but there are many other tasks where you don't have to reach in that area. You can actually use something more modest, and even more so, sorry for being geeky, but this is something I would like to say. We have libraries now that are, for instance, one of them is LangChain, where you can connect different models together, right? If you decide, if an NGO decides that this is the journey they would like to be on, they can have a person that's going to be working only with that, how to connect a model that is large and commercial, probably costly, with a model that is open source for different types of tasks, and build them together, and through that create simply a more sustainable architecture. So this is just one of many things that perhaps I could try and advise. But the first thing is to just remember that ChatGPT is not everything. We have a lot, and I believe we will have even more pluralism when it comes to generative AI in the near future.
Thank you for touching upon the role of CSI in AI growth, because this is also things that comes to my mind. What is the potential of the collaboration? And are there any examples of collaboration between AI scientists and NGOs? Because as I hear from you, this is the many great ideas, and I hear that there are a lot of scientists and also tech companies that are growing these models. But in case of the existing open source, are they linked to the communities itself? because this is the questions, are there responding to the need of the, for example, local communities or NGOs, or maybe this is the step that we could think about?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be happening increasingly because one thing that sort of we all started exploring maybe 2 or 3 months ago was a possibility to say connect any type of generative AI to a local database. So let's say you have an NGO that is we've had this example working with civil society on fostering democracy, or you have another NGO that is more focused, say, on climate. I'm assuming that all of these NGOs, as they've been growing, they have been building a database, right? And they probably had their own ideas around data stewardship, what kind of data is important to collect, which type of data is valuable in order to serve, for instance, a local community better, to understand a certain problem that appears better, or to track a certain process like, for instance, the elections, right, in the best possible way, in a way that shows us whether these elections have been conducted properly. I think we maybe did not emphasize enough in the past years how important it actually is to connect and collect, first of all, data, right? So collection of quality data is very important because now when you have a generative AI, you can actually use a plugin to collect data and then connect them to that generative model so that this model does not really dwell in its own knowledge base, but instead focuses on the problem that you presented to it. So you say, okay, now model, like ChatGPT or any other, I'm forcing you to inspect my database and respond to my questions accordingly. So let's say I have some huge record about democratic elections in Poland, and I want to ask generative model what's been happening, what kind of patterns do we see in these elections that have been happening, right, regarding votes that have been given in different areas and whatnot. What has been a worry was that generative models were lying, right? Were hallucinating. That's how we call this term, where artificial intelligence just synthesizes knowledge that does not exist. But if you use a plugin, you can actually make this model just work with that data set. And through that, the model will hallucinate much less and will focus on the problems that are given within that data set. So it's going to work more as an intranet, right, for you. Intranet solution that is really inspecting a local database and then answers your questions based on what it sees in that database. And I think this is something that should be and hopefully will be explored also by NGOs, particularly those that are data rich or that have a good way of just simply retrieving data, mining data from the internet, from the online world. I know that there are many NGOs that are also focusing on inspecting which databases are open. Open databases are great, right? And they're also useful for another purpose. You can use an open data set to train a model on some sort of problem, right? And then you can repeat the same operation. Let's say you give it your own data, but you said, oh, listen, this is the training that we've been giving you. Now use that training to solve my problem, right, that I have in my data set. And here I would say, again, quite often, you will have to, or like the NGO sector will have to figure out how to work with that data in a way that is still confidential, that is still safeguarding privacy. Recently, we've been seeing how, some of the generative models were building that security layer because earlier on they were not at all, right? So the data was flowing in and out without any control. That's been changing recently. And I do hope that particularly in Europe, what we will see is through the regulation that is coming, we will have better frameworks to work with large data sets that are training generative AI in a way that is, safeguarding simply privacy and security, because this is something I think we generally care about.
You mentioned election, and with election goes politics, and from my point, also disinformation. And we see deep fakes. We see how easy it is to generate by generative AI disinformation. And I would like to ask you how far new ways of disinformation can go and affect those NGOs that are actually countering disinformation and are fighting with this subject.
Well, I have many grudges here. Okay, so for me, it's kind of outrageous that we have not had a strong regulation that would allow us for decent fact-checking on social media. Now, even disregarding artificial intelligence, let's leave it aside for a second and park it somewhere. Let's just focus on social media platforms. We've seen problems regarding fact-checking, finding the reliable sources, particularly in the context of ongoing, upcoming elections. Just the most clear example is obviously Cambridge Analytica. And despite the fact that we all knew that there was clearly a major problem with the US elections in 2016 because of Cambridge Analytica, not so much has been done. And I'm not saying that there was not enough pressure on the side of civil society or NGOs, because the pressure, I think, was sort of there. But somehow the regulation, through lobbying practices, most probably, ended up being very soft. Imagine a world where fact-checking is as simple as liking something. So it's just a way of engaging you with the platform that is very easy to do. What kind of habits would it build? I think the best ones, if we had it, right? So this is, for me, an imaginative scenario that I would love to happen in reality, where you have platforms that are really allowing you to be engaged in a fun way in activities that are actually helping you to build a better internet for yourself and for everybody else. And that, unfortunately, has not been the case. So I'm not saying that I'm a utopian person, but there is a part of me that wants to believe that now, with this new wave of internet that will be fueled by generative artificial intelligence, we can simply try and do it better, right? So together with generative AI, you will have detection tools. You will have tools that would allow you to, use the power of generative AI, but in a transparent way. And actually, sorry to be referring back to the European context, because I know that our conversation sort of is more global, but I think it's a very interesting reference point, because in Europe, we will have this regulation called AI Act. I'm assuming this fall, or maybe towards the end of the year. And in that regulation, there is clearly a statement that says, artificial intelligence has to be trustworthy. And for it to be trustworthy, it needs to be transparent. So each and every time you produce something with artificial intelligence, and it does not say that it's bad, it's okay. I mean, if you write an email using ChatGPT or generative tool, I think that's okay. That's shouldn't be a problem, because it will soon be a standard. So that's fine, but it has to be labeled somehow. The same for image generation. You mentioned deepfakes. Deepfakes are now a problem because of the fact that you can build them easily, but the way to detect them is very hard. Not many people know of tools such as Detect Fakes by MIT. You have to make an effort, right? If you see something that's suspicious, you actually have to download that video if there is a possibility, or copy the link and send it to another platform that's going to check it for you, which will last for a while. So not many people have that possibility to actually spend their time on making sure that the content that they see is deepfaked or not, right? And I think it should be just simply made much easier for all of us. So I think a big part of advocacy that the civil society will have to somehow undertake, and also a big effort on our side, the whole society, is to actually build pressure around, enforcing that kind of regulation that gives us the power to detect whether something is fake or not. And I think it's very hard. It's not an easy task, and it's not trivial for sure. The detectors that we have today that are supposed to detect content generated with ChatGPT, they have an accuracy of 30%. This is super low. This is not satisfactory. But we can do better, I think. We can do better. And with enough sort of pressure, with enough resources, with enough talent on the side of, making AI transparent, we can actually, I think, achieve these goals, right? And I think it will be serving general purpose much better. And then that can be added as a layer to ChatGPT website, other generative open source tools, sites, GitHub, whatnot, and also social media platforms. So I do hope that perhaps this time around we can do this big tech revolution a bit better than the previous one.
This is a lot of great points and inspiration in terms of the future, but kind of getting back to the point that we are right now, many CSOs and NGOs are focusing on media literacy, digital literacy. And in this case, the focus and the goal is to educate, because as you mentioned, people do not know if it's fake or not, thinking about the communities, the society itself. And the goal for many of CSOs are to educate, to build the society of critical thinkers. And what would you recommend for those CSOs who are engaged to focus on, for example, to add to the agenda and educate themselves first, and then to the communities, because the knowledge is changing. Some things are still on and on, just in different forms, like the analog or AI or any other. But what would you recommend to focus on in the near future?
Well, first of all, I do see certain similarities with the sector that I'm representing, which is education. Right? In education, generative AI has been a major disruptor, as you know. Students are generating essays with GPT quite easily. Even I myself received recently a paper that started with the statement, as a language model, I would like to do blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, so that student didn't even edit the output. But to me, it was sort of not about the student, but more so about myself. And the fact that I should maybe put more emphasis on talking to my students about how to harness the potential of this technology, but also how to make it in a way that is trustworthy, that will give them an opportunity to learn from this tool also, but would not hinder their own competences. So, and I'm not saying now the whole burden is on you as NGOs or on me as a teacher or on us as an educational sector. I think obviously many different players are involved in this game. But at this point, I feel that it's mostly about having an open conversation. What's okay, what's not okay? Where do we see the potential of this technology that we could consider useful, beneficial? And where we feel sort of concerned? Because even in the educational sector, I think that generative AI can help you to give a more tailored feedback to the students, guide them a bit better regarding their personal needs and their struggles. You can think about scenarios of, classroom activities that are going to be changing all the time, where the teacher that is already overburdened would finally have a tool that can help to make the class just much more interesting in a short period of time. So I see a lot of good scenarios of using this technology. And I think you can, again, as a parallel, think about that in the context of NGOs. And as you go together and grow with this technology, you will find those use cases that are good for you, right? Where you say, okay, this is really suitable. I have this local community with these types of problems. How do I respond in the most tailored way? GPT or any other generative AI can become something for your own enhancement or increase or help in the cognitive capacities that you have in figuring out how to solve a problem. It's a useful tool. Can give you good hints, good ideas, right? It's a material that you as a human expert can work with. You should supervise it. You shouldn't delegate the task to the model and just leave it, right? This is something that is all about collaboration between you and the model, human in the loop or human in the center. This is for me a major principle that we have to learn how to use these models, but not how to delegate tasks to them so that you can fully get rid of them. That is, I think, very crucial. But then there are things that are concerning. We don't want early school children to be generating essays with artificial intelligence. We want them to learn how to create arguments and do some storytelling, right? And a compelling narrative. So I think it's very important to just avoid treating it in a very holistic way, that it's in general bad or in general good. That, for instance, I'm sort of concerned when I hear that an organization or a company decided to fully ban generative AI. Where does this go? This is not probably a way forward. The way forward is to be very detailed about it, to find people on your team who are actually quite passionate about it, interested. I see many people who are passionate about it. Even if they know little, they want to learn. Give them some knowledge, allow them for some onboarding, allow them to test this technology, to play with this technology, watch webinars, spend a couple of days really digesting knowledge about it and trying testing. There will be more good knowledge, good quality knowledge about these models that will be open as well very, very soon, because it's already building up. There are many new platforms, open access platforms that are popping up with good knowledge about how to use generative AI for image processing, video processing, text processing, whatnot. So I think if you find people on the team who are passionate about it, allow them, give them the space to try and figure out what those use cases that are good could be for you and what are those that are concerning, and then just, go step by step. And I think if you internally build that type of knowledge, then it's much easier to transfer it elsewhere to your communities, to your, to the people who could be interested in then taking it forward. And I think this is also a way to perhaps regain control over these technologies. To me, banning a technology always means that we are dismissing it and somebody else is building it. And a way forward with technology is that more people are savvy in using it. And I understand that there are questions about, maybe giving a powerful technology to someone who does not have all the best intentions. But in all honesty, good technology is always democratized. And I feel that a way forward is to first build the knowledge for yourselves and later on transfer it to the community.
And the final remark.
From human-like AI to human-centered AI, could it be next collective AI or community-centered AI? Or maybe the communities of AIs?
Oh, wow. This is loaded. It's a loaded question.
Yeah.
But I would say, okay, so what I feel is happening is that we currently have this, you pointed to it, sort of a situation where it's you against the chat, right? It's yourself and the chat. You are working together. I even saw my partner is currently building a sort of a big project, and he built himself some advisors in ChatGPT, and he talks to them, right? So this would be a community of AIs talking back to you as a human. And you even have a name for that. It's called one-person unicorn, I believe, where you have a person and then a virtual team on top of that person. It's a doable scenario. I think in overall, it's just something that is worthy of spending time for a certain period in your project, because I don't believe that you can build a meaningful project without human contribution, honestly. But I think if you are at a very early stage of ideation, incubation, figuring out how to do things, you can create yourself experts within generative AI. You can give them competences. You can say, your bio is like this. You are an expert in HR. Now you will help me in figuring out what's the best person to hire. And you have these conversations with these models, and they dig somehow deep in our collective intelligence, because their knowledge base is our collective intelligence. So they give that back to you. And I think that's useful. But to me, that is much less valuable than a situation where you actually have a chat versus team. human team. That to me is very interesting. And I have to tell you that we are trying to build something like that as we speak. My team and I, we're trying to move away from this human versus chat relationship that is sort of becoming maybe a bit even more too intimate. And it's you against the chat, you being isolated from the external world, from other humans and whatnot. That this is less of a desired scenario for the future of labor, also for the future of human relations. But instead, if we think about an assistant that is helping a team of people and gives to them what they need in the project in that particular timing, if you think about something that becomes maybe a team member, you can assign it many roles. Somebody who is working with the team, but somebody who is also a secretary for the whole team, right? So a tool that is much smarter than those that we've had before, that is really helping you out. And you say you had a leave, you were absent for a week, and then you get a wrap of everything that's been happening. And you don't have to dig through emails for a whole 2 or 3 days to just be back on track. But instead, you have something that you talk to that tells you, okay, the project has moved within that week by this and this. This is what has happened, right? So this is a time saver for everybody, but it also has to be something that takes into consideration human dynamics, how teams work together, how people have different styles of working, right? How to accommodate that and adjust the whole process to it. And I don't know quite yet where that will go, but I think generative AI, as the first technology that I've ever seen, has that capacity to become a collective technology. And I do hope that that's the scenario forward. And I would love projects like that to kind of start emerging very soon. I can promise that we will work on one.
Thank you for this full of knowledge talk. I'm sure that people working in CSOs and NGOs will appreciate topics that we touch upon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Looking for more resources in topics like countering disinformation, cybersecurity, personal and organizational resiliency, building positive narratives, or media literacy? Visit the Hive Mind platform, an online hub with free content, tools, online courses, and ability to connect with digital activists across the globe. Embrace the power of community with Hive Mind.